All right, so we just got done recording our recap of the Heat's loss to the 76ers. As soon as we get done recording it, Shams Charania from The Athletic tweets that there is optimism that Tyler Hero could return to the Heat lineup for Friday's game against the Houston Rockets in Houston, and that Tyler Hero is traveling with the team for their 3-game trip to Houston, and then of course they go to Indiana and then on to Atlanta. So we recorded our whole recap. David did not mention obviously that Tyler Hero could be back. There's a lot going on there. If Terry Rozier has to miss some time, Tyler Hero returning to the lineup would be a huge boost. And for a team that had such a hard time scoring in the half court against Philly on Thursday night, getting somebody like Tyler Hero would be huge. He's been out for a long time, but this is what we've been waiting for.
Yeah, that's great news, really. The Rozier things, obviously it adds another wrinkle into his return. I imagine that also might quash the idea of whether or not he starts or comes off the bench, at least for one game. The idea would probably be that Tyler would start right away.
Yeah.
And my feeling is that not only, did they take their time with the ramp up, they gave him that special treatment on his foot, took their time to make sure that he was coming back and that he wouldn't travel with the team unless there was some confidence that he was as close to full strength as he could possibly get. And now, just as we've seen with Embiid, it's time to start ramping him up, getting him back into game shape. I would imagine there's going to be a minutes restriction even without Rozier. So we might see some Patty Mills. We might see some DeLon Wright minutes there, or more Duncan and Caleb, something that we talked about possible lineups moving forward with the Rockets on Friday and, of course, with the Pacers on Sunday. But now with Tyler, you get a little bit of a bigger boost from the scoring end. So this is just really good, encouraging news. I hope he's not too rusty and too shaky and that it won't take long to incorporate him back into the offense. My feeling is that at his age, that ramp up probably is enough to get him as close as we could possibly. He's going to look a little shaky maybe at first, but he
hasn't really looked rusty coming back. I mean, unfortunately, he's come back from injuries quite a bit, and he never really looks that rusty when he comes back.
Right. He's such a natural bucket getter. Like, he's just such a good scorer and a natural scorer. Or I shouldn't say natural because obviously he's put in the work to get to this point, but it is such a strength of his game that when he does come back, I wouldn't be surprised to see him hit a couple buckets early on, just kind of set the tone and be like, all right, I'm back. Everybody can relax now. And then he can take over some of that scoring load that we've seen Terry had to take over the last few games. So we kind of talked about this in context of, if they do miss Terry, that forces Jimmy's hand a little bit. We do talk about Jimmy's passivity against the Sixers, a concern, something that's been a concern for a long while now. And now with Tyler coming back into the lineup, how does that play out? I would imagine it probably plays pretty similarly. I would have liked to see Jimmy be more active and more engaged, but once Tyler is back in the lineup, he takes on the scoring load because that's what he has done up to this point in his career.
Yeah, and so it's been now 3 weeks since he got the PRP injection in the foot, right. And the timeline was 3 weeks, right? It was a week of recovery from the injection and then 2 weeks of ramp up, and this would literally be on the dot if he were to return on Friday, because he got it on a Friday 3 weeks ago, and this would be on the dot a Friday that he would return. So well timed by Tyler Hero, I suppose. Now, optimism, right? Optimism that he can. He's not been listed as available yet. We'll see what ultimately ends up happening on Friday night. But boy, can the Heat use him right about now, whether or not it's Friday night in Houston or Sunday's must-win game in Indiana against the Pacers. They are going to need Tyler Hero, and especially if Terry Rozier does, to your point, has to miss maybe some real time here. We'll see. Terry Rozier said he was fine. We'll see if he's fine. Best case scenario, he's got all these guys back, but hopefully it's not a long-term thing with Rozier. And if Tyler Hero is coming back, then this team is getting healthy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great point. On a personal note, I am really looking forward to being at the Taurus in Coconut Grove on Friday night for our watch party and being a few drinks in and seeing Tyler just light it up. Like, that is going to be a really fun and exciting thing to be there with a lot of Heat fans, hopefully in attendance. So it's going to be a great time. It's going to be the return of Tyler Hero. If he does come back on Friday, that would be awesome. That would be a nice boost for everybody, I think, in the crowd. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Shots if Tyler Hero scores 30?
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. On the house.
Yeah, on the Taurus. Well, right? Okay.
I'll let him know.
Whole episode is coming up. The Heat lose to the 76ers. We got our takeaways from the game, what the Heat needed more from Jimmy Butler, what this means for the standings, the play-in tournament, and then just kind of broadly what's going on with Jimmy Butler. We get into all of that on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com. Joining me, as always, is NBA media member David Ramil. However, you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Friday night tonight, for many of you listening, we're going to be holding the Locked On Heat watch party for now a must-win game between the Heat and the Rockets. We're doing it at the Taurus in Coconut Grove. We are going to have drink specials. We're going to have a lot of fun chatting it up with you guys. Happy hour extended throughout the game. And if it's anything like tonight's game, we're going to need it. We're going to need it. So, again, that is tonight, the Taurus in Coconut Grove, Heat Rockets. Game starts at 8 p.m. We really hope to see you there. But meanwhile, we're recording this on Thursday night after the Heat lost to the Sixers 109-105. They gave themselves a chance late in this game, but Tyrese Maxey and Kelly Oubre scored 11 points in the final 4 minutes. The Heat themselves made just one field goal, David, in the last 8 minutes of this game. And that was a Terry Rozier bailout step-back three, as he's been accustomed to having to do in this offense lately. Tyrese Maxey himself outscored Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo combined. Jimmy and Bam, 34 points between the two of them. Tyrese Maxey finished with 37. So now the Heat find themselves a half game back of the Pacers. They're back in 7th place, which would put them back into the play-in tournament with 6 games left here for them. Where do you want to start with this loss?
I'm not entirely sure, because there's a lot to kind of take from it. You know, the Heat started down early. They were down by 16 in the first quarter, and then they mounted what was one of the best comebacks I've seen from the year in order to take the lead rather, at 46-43 off of Caleb Martin three-pointer. And from that point forward, you're thinking, okay, Miami's going to figure it out again. And then Philadelphia comes back, as you might expect that they could, and they wind up taking another double-digit lead into the second half. And then Miami comes back again to take a double-digit lead of their own. And you're thinking, okay, this is late in the game. You're thinking Miami's going to do just enough. You've got Jimmy Butler playing incredibly well. Kevin Love providing this tremendous spark. Haywood Highsmith was dominating, I think, continuing to improve on an almost in-game basis. And then, as you said, too much Maxey, too much Kelly Oubre, and not enough Jimmy and Bam Adebayo. Now, Bam was sitting out for most of that fourth quarter. He came back a little bit late. But even then, it seemed like whatever chemistry Jimmy had with Kevin Love completely dissipated. Whatever spark he had just completely failed. And it was struggling to find any good offensive possessions. Challenged well by Philadelphia's defense, but even when they had open looks, they just couldn't knock those down. And it, again, as you said, 8 minutes almost without a field goal. That's inconceivable. So I don't know how much to take from this game, because it was so bizarre and it played out so strangely. I did like some of Miami's runs here and there, and obviously you see the potential when they're clicking in all cylinder, and now they're relatively healthy, still without Tyler Herro, obviously, who would have been a factor tonight. I'm convinced of that. But for them to squander that lead, to fall apart so badly defensively, to not be able to contain Maxey at any point in time during the game, and for Eric Spoelstra not even say, hey, DeLon Wright, we brought you in here to be our best on-ball defender, and you've seen the capacity of him to do so in limited minutes since he's joined the team, and did not even sniff the court. I'm at a loss here, to be honest with you. I don't know what the hell happened. It was very, very strange. I thought Miami was going to be able to do just enough to hold on to the win, but for them to not be able to score in those last minutes of the game was just incredible to watch.
Yeah, you mentioned Kevin Love going out. The Heat scored 3 points after Kevin Love exited the game with 3.5 minutes left. What he had, I was texting you during the game. I'm like, do they have to close with Kevin Love? And I understand he played almost 19 minutes, and you want to kind of keep those minutes down. But could you have gotten him a breather and then play him and Bam together at the end of that game? I don't know. I know that there was definitely some rotation questions, and and they're valid, right? They're valid, and the DeLon Wright thing you bring up is fair. Also, Tyrese Maxey was just getting to the basket early in the game, and then they zoned him off, and then he was just making mid-range jumper after mid-range jumper, and he was making the threes, and it was like, all right, they took the rim away, and he was like, all right, I'll just make the shots from over here now. He was unstoppable. And so, yeah, we could do this whole thing about, and you know where I'm going to go with this, David, because this is where I always end up, but I think tonight it was especially prescient. Nikola Jovic had a great game tonight. 11 points, and boy, every single one of them were important. Felt like all of them were on the break. I thought he was great. Another awesome Haywood Highsmith game. 2 of 4 from three-point range for him for 12 points. Kevin Love with the 11 points off the bench. Jaime Jaquez with a little bit of a spark there late in the game. Caleb Martin, same thing. Terry Rozier, another 22-point outing on 20 shots, and the Heat just needed him to take all those shots, but they did enough, the role players. They did enough to win this game. The problem was that Jimmy Butler scored 20 points, 11 of which came in the second half. Bam Adebayo had 14 points on 15 shots. And Joel Embiid in his second game back had 29 points in 32 minutes. We already talked about Maxey just killing. Tyrese Maxey was the best player on the court tonight, and it wasn't even close. It wasn't even close. And so I look at the 2 stars on Philadelphia, and I look at the 2 stars in Miami, and that's where I'm starting and kind of ending with this entire, trying to figure out how the Heat lost this game. They need more. This is going to happen from Bam. And I thought Bam's defense was overall very good. I thought his offense was he just didn't have a shot tonight. But at least he was taking those shots pretty consistently throughout the game. He was involved in the offense, constantly setting screens for Terry Rozier and all these things. He didn't feel to me not involved in the offense. Jimmy Butler felt to me for 80% of this game, minimum, not involved in the offense, until he absolutely had to be involved in the offense late in the game. And basically Eric Spoelstra forcing him to get involved in the offense because he was like, hey, Jimmy, it's going to be you, Caleb, Haywood, Kevin Love out there, and some Jaime Jaquez minutes here. Somebody's got to take, somebody in this lineup has to handle the ball, and it's going to be you. He was okay. I never thought he got to great level. At this point now, and I know that they beat the Knicks the other night, but it was another sort of quiet game from Jimmy Butler. We talked about it after that game.
Yeah,
Jimmy Butler, if he's playing like this, is going to cost the Miami Heat a chance to get back to the conference finals. He is costing them right now a chance at a guaranteed playoff berth because the rest of his teammates are doing everything that they need to do. They have never gotten this kind of production from the point guard spot. You have this kind of depth that this team has been deep, has never had this much depth. And Jimmy Butler has never been worse at this point in the regular season. He usually starts to ramp up into something resembling playoff Jimmy. And he had no lift in this game. I think that there might be something, I think he's wearing down. He had one play, David, where he got he had a drive into Joel Embiid and left his feet late and just sort of ran into the Joel Embiid wall. And it was, I wrote it down because it was so jarring. It was like, that's not Jimmy Butler. He usually has a little bit more lift and strength getting to the bucket. Even against Embiid, Jimmy Butler, if he's playing like this, is going to cost the Heat a chance.
I will say that I think he's thrown off by the officiating rules, and whether that's fair or unfair or just realistic, I think that's where we're at, is that he's probably accustomed to getting a lot more calls his way. And to his credit, he hasn't been complaining or whining, and nobody on the Heat were really when it comes to officiating. That's just not who they are. And so I think that's thrown off a little bit, because when he starts to get to the rim at least and feels that contact, he's usually, or has heretofore, been rewarded by free throws. And normally that's enough to kind of say, you know what, if you're opening up that part of my offense where I can drive and at least I'm going to be able to get some points, I'm going to be able to manufacture something by getting to the line, at least that opens up my spacing for a little bit to try and take some of those jumpers that we saw him attempting, some of those cuts at the rim. He had a nice lob, at the rim from Kevin Love. That timing is still really, really well.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of where he's at right now, is that he probably expected him to be able to get more points from the line than what he was able to do.
But it's been a month and a half.
That might have been the difference. No doubt. I get it.
Since the All-Star break, when these changes have been made, just to point that out to the listener. It's been a month and a half since these changes have been implemented. And for somebody with a basketball IQ such as Jimmy Butler, and I'm not questioning it, you would think he would adjust, right?
I don't know what adjustments he could possibly make, because up to this point in his career, that's pretty much been, at least in his Heat stretch, that's basically, he had the three-pointer, he was taking those shots, he looked good during that run in the third quarter, especially with that connection with Love, but there was a play down the stretch that really was upsetting to me. And it was funny, right as you weren't watching it because you were at the Kaseya Center, and I was watching from home tonight because I didn't go to the game. But, John Crotty was saying, well, Jimmy needs to come to the ball. And I can't remember who had the ball in their hands at that point. It might have been Bam, might have been Terry Rozier. And they're looking for Jimmy curling around. He kind of half speeds his way towards the ball, whoever was handling it at the top of the key. And the pass is made to him as we've seen him kind of turn up the speed and curl around that screen as he drives to the rim. Instead, because he's going just half speed, that's when Kelly Oubre intercepts the ball, winds up going with that finger roll at the end to put them up 4. Or maybe it was just 2 at that point. Yeah, I don't know. It was out 4 because then it was Terry Rozier who hit the 3-pointer later. But either way, it was just like that really stuck out to me because I'm not used to seeing Jimmy, especially in clutch situations, falter or not be that level of engaged. And that's what I saw from him tonight.
Engaged. It's a great word. Like he's not that extra level of effort. And we know it when we see it with Jimmy Butler, right? When he is sprinting to the ball, when he's breaking out that spin move on the baseline.
Determined, with intent, whatever you want to call it.
When he wants to post up, he had Tyrese Maxey in a post up earlier in the game and just passed out of it. And he did the same thing against Miles McBride the other night against New York. And there's some of these. Right. You mentioned the free throw attempts, and while you were talking, I looked it up. 8.1 free throw attempts per game before the All-Star break. 7.1 since. So he's averaging one less free throw. It's not enough. That's
not the difference, then.
That's not the difference. And I think you just expect Jimmy to hit that extra gear. And look, they lost this game. It doesn't mean that they can't get out of the 6th seed, but it does mean that right now they're back in that 7th seed. Philly, the team they just lost to, is in that 8th seed. And we could be seeing this team again if it comes to a 7-8 matchup. And something's got to change if the Heat are going to win that game and not be forced to play the winner of the 9-10 game and potentially miss the playoffs altogether. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute, when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th, so get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees do apply, and now for some legal info. Claim as of the first quarter of 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long? Do you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. It's Locked On Sports today. It brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So standings update. The Heat got a break last night or 2 nights ago, depending on when you're listening to this, whatever. Wednesday night when the Pacers lost to the Nets. So, we were not expecting the Pacers to lose to the Nets. That means that the Heat wake up Thursday morning in 6th place, a half game up on the Pacers for that 6th place spot. Pacers idle tonight. Heat play, lose to the 76ers, so they drop back to 7th. So that break that the Heat got with the Pacers losing to the Nets basically washed, right? So now we're back to square one where Sunday's game is still a must-win. It was probably always a must-win. But the Heat are going to now have to win one of these back-to-backs probably, whether it's in Houston on Friday night or against the Dallas Mavericks later on. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I still, in my heart of hearts, think that Miami ends up getting that 6th seed. I still think that we end up there. But that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter how I feel. It's ultimately...
Their work is absolutely cut out for them. I mean, the challenge gets that much tougher after a loss like tonight's because you lost to an opponent who's making their own run to try and get out of the play-in tournament too.
This game was more of a must-win for Philly than it was Miami even.
Yeah, I suppose mathematically, no doubt. But you still want to be able to create and add to whatever cushion had existed and dissipated tonight. And the same situation applies on Sunday night against the Pacers. You're traveling two there. Now you've got to go after a loss. You're not even encouraged by that loss. You can't even muster that kind of energy. Terry Rozier, we should mention, bumping knees with Kyle Lowry late in the game. You saw him limping around the locker room. Eric Spoelstra said he was probably going to be okay. I don't know. We haven't got any kind of real medical update, and I don't think that we'll necessarily get one. My guess would be that he does not play tomorrow. So now you're talking about a change in the starting lineup when you're down already Tyler Herro as your go-to scorer, and that just makes everybody's work that much more difficult. And so you're going to have to find some way. And if I recall correctly, I think Golden State was beating Houston early tonight. I'm not sure how that score held
Golden
up
State
or
won.
not, but okay, well, there you have it. So the Rockets are going to go back, and they're at home. They're going to be hosting the Heat, and they're going to look to try and win that game because they're playing hopes.
They're also almost mathematically out of it, if not mathematically out of it. So maybe they're a little bit less motivated. So the good thing is that at least the Rockets are also on the second night of a back-to-back. Fortunately for Houston, they're at home, but like that rest advantage that otherwise would have been there for Houston, not really there after a up and down game with the Warriors tonight. The Terry Rozier thing, I'm with you. It doesn't even matter what we're guessing. All I know is that Eric Spoelstra said he was fine, and then Terry Rozier said he's not being bothered by it, which means to me that he can miss 2 months. It's like based on this entire season. I don't believe a word of what Eric Spoelstra or Terry Rozier said because they've been saying that stuff about various players all year long. So I would be surprised if Rozier played tomorrow. And again, I'm not. I saw him limping
I think that was the same knee
badly
he hurt,
around that locker room.
That left knee, that was the same one he had hurt previously, and it kept him out of those games earlier in the season. So I think, he was wearing a leg sleeve on it, and then, unfortunately, he just wound up, upping.
Best case scenario is he only misses Friday night. That would be the best case scenario. So what would I do if I were the Heat? They have started Patty Mills in the past. They have sometimes gone with DeLon Wright. I would say, how about none of those guys? Just shorten the rotation. Go ahead and just start Caleb or somebody else, and just go. Just Duncan Robinson, Caleb, Jimmy, and now Jimmy has no excuse because he can't just defer to Terry Rozier anymore. Just go because they're going to need Jimmy Butler to be engaged. So that's what I would do. We'll see what they ultimately end up doing if Rozier does have to miss some time. Going back to this game though, Joel Embiid's awesome. He was probably going to win. He was on pace to win his second MVP in a row before he got hurt earlier in the year. He had, to do this tonight to Miami in your second game back with 29 points in 32 minutes. And he didn't even look like he was in good shape yet. Like he's still working in that conditioning. He's playing 5 or 6 minute spurts, and he still was just the most dominant player on the floor outside of his teammate, Tyrese Maxey. So that does not bode well if you're the Heat, and he's got another week and a half to ramp up to a potential play-in matchup. Again, what has to change for Miami? Is it as simple as, and I think this is the answer, Jimmy Butler just has to get to that level, Bam Adebayo has to get to that level? Like, you can't get that thoroughly outplayed by the other two stars and hope that Haywood Highsmith bails you out, because it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I think that's the baseline for what needs to change, but I think it also starts with the defensive end, because giving up those kind of points to Maxey and Oubre, that Embiid's going to get his because, at 7'1" and 300 pounds, he can get that shot off over everybody. And there's nobody in Miami's roster that can even contest it, much less get a shot block. So you just hope that those shots don't fall. And, some of them didn't, but a lot of them did. And that was the difference maker. He didn't even do his damage at the free throw line, which was my concern going into the game, is that he was going to get a friendly whistle, but no, he only took 5 free throw attempts. So that wasn't the issue. It was just that jumper after jumper after jumper. I can't recall, and I didn't look it up, how many points he had in the painted area, but I don't think it was much. And it was just, that's an unstoppable weapon. So given that, I think that you have to kind of focus on taking Maxey out. Like, maybe he's got a bigger role now. Like, even last year in the playoffs, that was still James Harden and Embiid's team, and then Maxey was complimentary in that sense. Maybe he's not ready for the challenge, although he certainly looked at tonight, and I wouldn't assume that that's the case. You can only hope for it, really, but you have to find a way to at least make him less comfortable, because it was just too easy for him. And I texted you this during the game. It seemed like, he would start off, come down on the wing a little bit, have the ball in his hands, and then he'd dish it off to somebody at the top of the key, and then they'd reset the action. And by that point, because they were in zone so often, it was Duncan or whoever it was guarding Terry Rozier in some stretches, they were on Maxey to start, then they would hedge to wherever had the ball at the top of the key, and then they would dish it back to Maxey, and as soon as he catches it, It's lightning quick, that run to the basket, and nobody was stopping him. If somebody else collapsed, if they were maybe somebody stepped up to try and deflect the shot or anticipate his drive, then he just pull up for the jumper, and it was just that easy for him. And so you've got to be able to neutralize him to some degree. It's easier said than done, but that's got to be a focus.
Jimmy Butler ended up taking him for certain stretches, and I thought that was interesting. It didn't really help.
Sure. Right.
What, like a box and one, where you have somebody come in and face guard him, have Haywood Highsmith just chase him around the court and then play the rest of your zone. Maybe get into that zone a little bit earlier. Eric Spoelstra was pleading with his team to get into a full court press at different parts of the game, and sometimes they would do it and sometimes they wouldn't. So that was also there
to some degree.
Just mixing up the looks a little bit more on Tyrese Maxey, hoping that some of those shots that went in tonight don't go in, but also trying to take away some of those shots that you mentioned. If you kind of get into that zone a little bit earlier, you start taking away the rim. Maybe that's there too. They scored also in the half court, the Heat, 76.5 points per 100 possessions. That's awful. Ooh. I mean, that's basically not scoring. Their half court offense was atrocious. And a lot of that was some missed Bam jumpers that he usually makes. We already talked about the Jimmy Butler part of this. But their transition game was so important. They had 23 points off of turnovers in this game. They had 24 fast break points. So they're going to need more of that. Get out and run, right? Get out and run. Because even in a week and a half, Joel Embiid's probably still not going to be at 100%. Get out and run. Neutralize Embiid. Take him out of the game. Maxey might like it, but I don't know that the rest of the Philadelphia 76ers roster likes it a whole lot. Maybe Kelly Oubre likes it, but that's about it. I think if this team gets out and runs, you can create a little bit more of an advantage, but you're going to have to score better in the half court, and that means the Terry Rozier, Bam Adebayo pick and roll has to be better. When Rozier makes that pocket pass to Bam at the free throw line, he's got to make those jumpers. He didn't make a whole lot of them tonight. And then Jimmy Butler has just got to be better with the post-ups, with the drives, the things that weren't there tonight, and get some of those buckets too. And also worth mentioning,
three-point shooting. Yeah.
Duncan Robinson has been off for a couple nights.
Yeah.
That needs to be better.
Without a doubt. Like he's a non-factor out there. He did have 1 of 4 field goals, but he missed all of his 3-point attempts. I think he had one shot that sailed completely wide of the basket too. Maybe I'm misremembering, but he looks rusty. He looks like he's in his own head a little bit. And I know he's coming back from injury too, and he's got to find that groove that he was in before the injury. We kind of forget because he did miss so much time. He had a monster game right before the injury, his best game of the season, and yet he has struggled in his return. Hopefully he'll continue to find his rhythm over the next few games. You don't have a lot of time, but if you're looking at, a play-in tournament game against the Sixers, the hope is that by that point he'll be back in rhythm and he'll be a factor.
I'm not that worried about Duncan. I just think shooters go through a little bit slumps, and I think that's just what's happening as he works his way back, and he'll get out of it. All right.
It's Jimmy. It's Jimmy, right? That's the big concern.
Exactly. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's show is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV, your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into an existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV shows, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college NCAA tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV because they recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. And that includes all of us over at the Locked On Network and most of the big pro leagues, college conferences as well. Fire TV channels also let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep you up to date on all the latest in the world of sports. March Madness, the NBA playoff race, the Major League Baseball, and so much more. They've also got great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, whatever you're looking for, you'll find it. So check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. And if you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. And today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? You ever wonder what adventure might be around the corner? Well, our friends over at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. We start off with the 24 Nissan Rogue. It's a great car. I own one myself. It's a perfect car for driving around the city, but I also feel comfortable taking it on an adventure if you want to go on a road trip or go out and see some sights a little bit further away from home. The Rogue has you covered. They've got a great infotainment system, nice big screen. They've got their Google Assistant that always keeps you up to date on everything you need to know. It's a great car, great combination of lots of features, but there's also the 24 Nissan Pathfinder. It's a little bit bigger, obviously. It seats up to 8 with expansive cargo capacity and advanced available 4x4 capability. It's got 284 horsepower. So it's got all the power you're looking for, but a lot of the luxury. And if you're looking for even bigger, well, then try the Nissan Armada. It'll change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Incredible power, but also first-class luxury and style. So take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada, and go find your next big adventure. Go shop nissanusa.com.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions on Twitter using that hashtag AskLOHeat. You can reach us lockedonheat@gmail.com, Locked On Heat on Instagram, and as a reminder,
or
just talk to us at the Taurus in Coconut Grove. Ask us your questions in person. Heat Rockets, 8 p.m. We'll be there a little bit earlier.
With enough drinks, I'll answer anything as honestly as I possibly can. So don't worry about it. Why do the Heat suck, bro? I'll tell you after a few drinks. Don't worry about it.
Some of the off-the-record stuff. We could share people the things that we see that we're not allowed to say on the podcast. Some of the insider scoops.
Now we're gonna get Heat PR is gonna show up at the watch party and be like,
"It's like, what do you know?"
Yeah. There go the credentials.
There go the credentials. Let's get to some of these questions. Let's talk a little bit more about Jimmy. We got a ton of questions about him, so we got to address it a little bit more. Viv writes in, "What is going on with Jimmy?" 5 question marks, and we got a lot of things a little bit like that. I was talking with some people before this game, David, and typical pregame talk. What do you think? Do the Heat win? Do the Sixers win? How do you see this one playing out? And the answer that I gave to everybody was, depends on the kind of Jimmy Butler that the Heat get. And that's what it is. And that's what it comes down to every single game right now. What kind of Jimmy Butler are we getting? And if you're getting an engaged and an interested Jimmy Butler, then I think the Heat can beat anybody, including the Sixers team in front of them tonight. But I don't know. Is it just that is my question? Because he's not getting the same kind of lift that he used to get. Yeah. Physically, he just looks a little bit different. Like, what are you seeing from Jimmy?
No, I think it's a lot of the same. I think it's an incredible turning point for him, and it's a scary one to watch from this side of the equation, especially for a lot of Heat fans, because this guy has been so dynamic over the last 3 seasons, where there was legitimate MVP conversations for several stretches during all those seasons, 4 seasons, I should say, sorry, including the COVID shortened one, and the expectation is that he's going to be able to rise to the challenge again. Like, even non-Miami based media members all expect playoff Jimmy to click at some point, but we just haven't seen it. And to your point earlier in the show, like, we usually see it by this stretch of the season as he's gearing up for the playoffs, but that has not been the case. And so it's such a crucial turning point, because on the one side, you've got the possibility of him reaching that potential in the playoffs. And I still think that's the case, but you're also seeing him, go to the Miami Open. You're also seeing him riding horseback through downtown Miami. You're also seeing all these off the court interests. And that's a really precarious place for a star like Jimmy to be in, because as much as I think Heat fans embrace that other side of him, you kind of want to see him more embrace the playoff Jimmy mode that he needs to get into in order to carry Miami. And as I've said before, I also don't think he expected to be the guy who had to carry the season. He said it before the start of the season: we'll go as far as Bam and Tyler take us. And while Bam has done his usual yeoman work as a defender, the offensive load hasn't been there. Tyler has obviously missed a long stretch of time, and he was not quite to the level that a lot of people expected him to be even before the injury. So I think he's had to do more work than he expected during the regular season, with the expectation that he can flip that switch in the playoffs. But it's a little harder to believe that he can just suddenly become that great Jordan-esque type player once the playoffs begin.
Here's where I'm concerned, is if I thought it was just a level of disinterest, I could be frustrated by it, but not worried about it. Right? I could be frustrated with, hey, man, these games matter. Let's get out of the play-in tournament, get the guaranteed playoff berth. What are you doing? I don't think it's a disinterest. I what I'm worried about is whether or not he can hit that gear again, because
physically limited.
Physically, can he hit that gear again? Like, I don't think it's a level of disinterest when he doesn't have lift on his layup, or when he runs smack dab into Joel Embiid. You know, like, I know my dog is getting older when she can't jump onto the couch like she used to, and sometimes she just runs right into the couch instead. It's kind of what Jimmy Butler looked like, running right into Joel Embiid. You know, and so, not to just take one play out of it, but there's been a lot of things like that with Jimmy lately. And then we got that stretch where he hit playoff Jimmy mode. He told Chris Haynes of Bleacher Report, hey, I could just turn it on. I'm in playoff Jimmy mode. And then what happened? He kind of left playoff Jimmy mode. And I do want... So is it a level of disinterest, or is it just an incapability to do it anymore? Because with age, like, at some point, he's just not going to be playoff Jimmy. That's not an if, it's a when, right? He's 34 years old. I don't know if it's going to happen now, or 35, 36, 37 years old, but at some point, it's just not going to happen anymore. And we're not going to know until it's too late. And I'm wondering if right now we're starting to see the signs, right? Maybe there is a little bit of passivity, because there definitely is passivity to his game lately. But is it because he's disinterested, or is it because he knows he only has a little bit left to give? I don't know.
I don't either. And we won't know until it plays out. Like, again, that's the playoffs are going to be such a huge determining factor in how the rest of his career plays out. Because I've told you before, I've asked the question about how much longer Jimmy can be just playoff Jimmy for the past 3 seasons, because we don't usually see players at his age coast in quotes, for the regular season and then just take it up to this incredible level. And yet does he have that another level that he can reach this year? I don't know. And players, as they age, they have such a hard time accepting that reality, because it has been something that they could just do so easily. And then all of a sudden you get to a point where you can't do those things physically as easily as you once did. And all of a sudden you have to redefine your career. That's almost usually impossible. Like, we don't see players like LeBron who continue to play at a high level late into his 30s. And Jimmy's getting closer. He's closer to that part than he was to the start of his career. And so you have to take that into consideration. He's going to hit a wall, and it just might be this season, or it might be the next, if he can have one more playoff run in him. And that's the hope. That's the hope.
Yeah. Quickly, Jorge writes in, are we kidding ourselves actually thinking this team can win at least one playoff game or a play-in game? I'm going to go so far as to say this. I still think that he'd end up getting the 6th seed. I still think they end up getting it. And if they do, and if it's Cleveland that ends up at that 3 seed and the 3-6 seed, I think Miami could beat Cleveland without playoff Jimmy.
Yep.
I think the Heat are good enough, and I'm not a believer in the Cavs. So in terms of getting through the playoffs, that's one thing. But to go any further than that, they're going to need playoff Jimmy. Is that enough time to, if you can get a couple good Jimmy Butler performances in the regular season, maybe you need it in the play-in tournament. I don't know, but we'll see what happens. All right. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your podcast app.